You did a 12-team, way too early college football playoff projection for next year. Why don't you take us through how you calculated this, and we'll go through that, and then we have some news to get to at the end of the show.
I ran it through the Ubin computer matrix of numbers and all of these things, but these are not in any particular order. And I'm not sure about the conference affiliations. We're still debating on the 5, 7, 6, 6. So if there's some inconsistencies there, I apologize. But my 12, Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, LSU, Texas, and the Fighting, still Quinn Ewers probably, Oregon, Ohio State. I'm going to jump on the Ole Miss bus. I think Missouri brings back a lot. I think Arizona wins the Big 12 next year. And then Tennessee squeezes in. I'll buy in on the Nico hype. And then, of course, let's not forget the G5 gets a bid. And Liberty is well positioned to not lose another game. Their schedule is a little tougher next year. They got Eastern Carolina. But you look around the G5, there's not a lot of people that you're looking at them and saying they're going to load up. Liberty kept Caden Salter. They're in the CUSA where they have a lot of natural advantages. Jamie Chadwell's in a good spot. So that is my 12-team playoff field.
I don't know that I take exception to anything. I think Tennessee is an interesting addition there. But I don't really know. It's so hard to tell because you know what the hardest part about these way too early rankings are is that there's a whole other portal window that happens in the spring. And we're not necessarily sure like what rosters are going to look like until you get to almost April going into the next year. And that's a really difficult proposition. But like, I like the notion. And I know I made an appearance on another podcast last week where, you know, usually going into seasons, Dave, in the past, and again, maybe this is just, forgive me for my sins, but I would say, hey, show me the 247 Sport composite rankings and I'll show you the 5 or 6 teams that can actually do it. Neither Michigan nor Washington would have made my list coming into the year. And I think the reform of that going into the 12-team playoff and in the portal era and the NIL era is that list is probably more like 15 or 16 teams going into the year, maybe even more. And like teams like Arizona, for instance, that was a very good football team this year. My alma mater, bear down, might actually have an opportunity to be like, what if they bring in some transfers that help them, get even better? Like it is a world now where teams like Washington and Michigan and even lower rated teams in that 247 Sport composite actually have a chance to win a national championship.
And I think it's going to be really interesting. We don't need to go down I've talked to enough people this week about the portal and all this stuff, but there's still going to be a lot of roster movement that happens. And there's a whole nother portal cycle in April. There will be some surprises, I am sure, post-spring. There will be some teams that look around during spring practice and they say, oh no, we got a huge hole here. What we thought we had, we don't have. Let's call our collective. Let's sniff around rosters that we like, and let's tamper a little bit, and let's get a guy. That's going to happen in April. So we just are in a new space in the sport where you could get some sense of what rosters are going to look like and what teams are going to look like in January. You can't anymore. Like we're still going to have a ton of roster movement. Obviously, we had Quinshon Judkins today go to Ohio State. That's late. There's still some good players in the portal, and we're going to have another portal cycle where guys can transfer again. We don't need to get into a rules situation, but like you're going to have more guys go in the portal. And
well, I want to do a comparison based on your top 12 and kind of look at some of the BetMGM early national championship odds that have been released. Recently, Georgia is number 1 at 5-1, Alabama 6-1, Ohio State 7-1. So you have the 3 teams that are typically in that situation from a recruiting standpoint remaining in that top 3 fields. So now you move on. Michigan, a team that I said had 15% chance to make the playoff next year, sits at 8-1 currently. Oregon 9-1, Texas 10-1, Ole Miss 11-1, LSU 16-1. 20-1, Clemson and Florida State, Penn State 25-1, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and USC 30-1, Texas and A&M 40-1, Mizzou 50-1, and then Washington 80-1 going into next season. So there's a lot there to kind of unpack your Tennessee team is not represented on that list. And maybe it's just because the odds aren't accounting for that. Maybe Nico's a star. I don't know yet. But I do think that also, too, like at times, like the offseason odds for Georgia to win the championship would be like plus 175 or plus 200. And now it's 5-1. So we're looking at more wider odds for the teams that are more can't miss, no doubt about it teams. So, it's going to be a very interesting offseason discussion as we get into it of like which teams actually can win a national championship next year. I mean, why can't Penn State be in there? Penn State's a team that's probably going to make the playoff next year if they go 10-2. What if they?
We'll see, Ari. Listen.
I mean, Dave, I think 10 wins in a power conference is probably going to be enough for a lot of teams.
I think you're underrating the new Big Ten, and that Penn State can just walk in and win 10 games. Like, you're going to have to play a tougher schedule.
I'm not saying that they will.
Just Ohio
I'm saying
State
that they
Michigan
can
anymore. They can.
Washington got a nice little welcome to the conference tonight too. Like it's a hard. Yeah. Penn State, for what we know, I mean, their only two losses were Michigan and Ohio State, and guess what? Everybody else lost to them too. So I'm just saying, Penn State, if they have coordinators in there that come in and work, they got a receiver in the transfer portal. Drew Aller takes a big step forward. Why can't they win a national championship, or why can't they be in the discussion? I mean, that's the whole promise of the 12-team expansion, right? You're supposed to be here on January 8th saying these teams can win. That's the whole point of this thing, right? More inclusion. And in an era where
I think the whole point of it, Ari, is to make more money. But yeah, sure.
Well, you know what I'm talking about. But from a fan standpoint,
yeah, I get it. Yeah.
I'm just saying. I'm not sitting here saying I think Penn State's going to win the national championship. I'm saying, weren't they like two receivers and a better quarterback away from beating Michigan this year, and they won the national?
Sure, but I think
far off.
But Penn State's existence for much of the entirety of the playoff era, 14 playoff era, is. Can you beat Michigan? Can you beat Ohio State? If you split those two and you take care of business, you're probably going to be in the playoff. They were never able to do that and get in the playoff. That's not what the Big Ten is going to be. The idea that they can win 10 games is, and I think that's going to, this goes back to the conversation we had on Sunday, Ari, is that we kind of have to recalibrate what a successful season is. I think in these new big time leagues, SEC and Big Ten, with the kind of schedules that teams are going to be playing, 8-4 and 9-3, there's going to be some really good teams that put up records that in many years people would scoff at or run a guy out of town. And I think there has to be some recalibration. And when you get into the playoff field, you're going to have, if you go 8-4 and you sneak in and you say, well, we're good, it's just our schedule's hard, you're going to have to go prove it. And if you can do that, you can extend the life of your, however long you're going to coach.
I also think we're also in an era where a 9-3 team can still make it too.
No, I think that's what I'm saying. I think they will. I think they absolutely can. I think you're going to see teams that go 8-4 and 9-3 get in the playoff over a 10-2 team from the ACC, or not an 11-1, but a 10-2 team from the Big 12 that doesn't have the quality wins. If you go 8-4 and you have 6 wins over, or 4 wins or whatever over top 25 teams, and a team is 10-2 and has 1 win over a top 25 team from whatever the Pac-12 Mountain West becomes, from the Big 12, if the Big 12 has a bad year, I think that's a real thing that can happen and probably will happen in the 12-team playoff era.